This is OffPlanet Radio.
Welcome back to the second hour of OffPlanet Radio Live for March the 6th, 2013. I'm Randy Maughans. And what can you say about James Swagger except that he is amazingly enthusiastic, full of knowledge, and just charges the entire atmosphere with his passion for what he does. We'll get him back again at some point. And go check out his work. If you haven't read the books, I'd highly recommend them if you have that interest in what he's doing there. My guest this hour comes to me on a way too long schedule. It's been about 2 years since I spoke with William Ramsey. We actually go back, I think, about 3 or 4 years to a time when there was a show that I used to do occasionally with talk show host named Visigoth, and that's how we got to know each other. And he was with me back in 2010. We did an interview on Aleister Crowley, and then we did a national syndicated talk show where I was guest host called UFO Encounters Live, and he was on that show with me as well. And there are links on the webpage for this as well. You can go back and look at the material. His first book is called Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11 and the New World Order, and it is an epic work in terms of linking symbolism and the prophetic side of Aleister Crowley to what happened on September 11th, 2001. And with that, I want to bring up my guest, William Ramsey. William Ramsey, welcome to OffPlanet Radio. I don't think you were actually on when the show was called that before.
No, not yet. Thanks for having me on your new show. I appreciate it. It has been a while.
Yeah, it has been way too long. And we're going to talk tonight about the West Memphis 3 murders, which goes into some pretty heavy doses of Satanism, witchcraft, and ritual sacrifice. And as I said to you offline, maybe a good way to introduce the subject is to introduce the nexus for all of this, which actually is Aleister Crowley. How did you start getting into your research about Aleister Crowley that led to the book?
Well, initially what I was seeing was all these kind of numbers that were associated with 9/11 that, seeing them in random outside in the kind of common culture and also in the event, I realized that they must signify something. So I really tried to research and figure out what their meaning was. I saw the 11, 77, 93. 175 was kind of a lesser number, but those three kind of main numbers I kept seeing. I really don't have a background in witchcraft or Satanism at all. And there was a guy who was this part of this group out of Texas. It was Ghost Troop. He was, I can't remember his name right now, but he was either a colonel or a major or something, and he had noticed the same numbers. So I started researching, and I realized that these numbers kind of went back to Crowley. These were kind of Crowley's prime numbers. 11 is his number of magic. 77 represents kind of the Babylon and beast combined, and then 93 represents his two favorite numbers, which are his two favorite words, which are agape, which means love, and thelema, which means will, and each of those in the Kabbalah equal to 93. So once I saw that, then I really just started researching Crowley and read a lot of pretty much all the biographies out there, and then his source material, and I realized a lot of the biographical material did not have a view of Crowley that I gleaned from his actual writings. And so then I wrote that book and self-published it and put it out there, and I think it wasn't just the 9/11 event, but the 9/11 event was a herald for this idea of Crowley of kind of changing the entire world into kind of an aristocratic revolution, a feudal state, and a kind of an age of chaos. So I saw the overlaps there, and that's kind of was my general thesis of that first book, Prophet of Evil.
Looking back now 2 years on, and the book's been out there, and you've continued to research and build on your work, how today is your perspective different, and especially based on the events we saw even leading up to the end of 2012? Are we still seeing the ripple effect that came out of 9/11? Are we still seeing these streams of numbers and what I call spiritual signatures into these mass trauma events?
I think so. I mean, I still see the kind of deception and the structured events that clearly have like a hidden hand in them, or they're used by, I guess it would be a modern day sorcerer or a magician. So I still see that kind of mind manipulation and Satanism that are involved in these events, and there's correlations of the events in the common culture through the Batman movies or these other things. So it's clear to me that they're still psychically driving or trying to psychically drive the population of the U.S. and I think the world.
I guess I have to wonder how deep the whole psychic driving thing goes when you begin to look. You go back and you look at Dark Knight Rises, and you realize that streamed through a half of a year after it was released. I mean, the Aurora shooting itself, the signature event, the release of the Batman movie, the massacre there. I've written articles on it. I'm sure you've put a lot of material together on all the iconic images that streamed through that event. And then moving forward through to the events in December 2012 at Sandy Hook, where we began to see another gigantic ripple of the same thing, which points back to the Batman movie, which after it's released on Blu-ray and DVD, people begin to analyze the frames, and there's a map with Sandy Hook and Aurora on the map, and all of a sudden now it's just like completely out of control. How do we even factor this kind of stuff into a reality stream?
It's hard. I mean, what it connotes, I think, to me, is just an incredible level of foresight and manipulation and correlations between what we see in our media and the acts that take place in the world. Like there's a script, and it's pretty amazing. It's pretty hard to get, at least for me, to put my arms around it. But even in The Dark Knight Rises, there's Crowley's numbers are in there, and a lot of secret society numbers. There's a 77 on one of the signposts. There's 223, which is a big number for Skull and Bones and a lot of other secret societies. So, or 322, excuse me. But it's just amazing that they're the breadth of how they're trying to, really shape the culture and society.
How deep do you think it goes in terms of complicity? I mean, who, in your mind, could mastermind this and put it together in the way that it occurred? This is conspiracy on steroids as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, you'd have to have like deep state actors who are financing certain films, who are associated with secret societies at the very highest degree, who associate with other people in network secret societies, and essentially people who have a long-term plan. And for me, going back to 9/11, once I researched 9/11, I saw that it was a vast undertaking, and it was structured, and it was obviously had the signature of all kinds of intelligence agencies, but they planned that event out well in advance. It wasn't something that just came up, 12 months in advance. This was something that they had, a legend built up for the terrorists. They had this phony guy, Osama bin Laden, that they, were running for at least 2 or 3 years and, talking about him as this phony boogeyman. So, it just connotes this foresight and, the many-tendrilled or many-headed hydra of I guess you could call it the beast system, I guess.
Well, if you look at the Batman movies and director Christopher Nolan, now the thing that, and honestly, writing about Aurora was probably one of the most intense things I ever did. I did it over a weekend. When Sandy Hook came out, I was on holiday leave, and I spent 2 days with that. And at the end of the 2 days of dealing with the research on Sandy Hook, I melted down. I quite literally friggin' melted down. I looked at Chris Nolan's work, and I realized that this director who had done 3 Batman movies had also done the movie Inception, which is a movie about dream manipulation, dream state manipulation, and looking at both events and looking back at some of the signatures of serial killers, including Jared Loughner in New Mexico.
Right. Mm-hmm.
There were all these aspects to dream state, to dream time, and the idea that somehow there was a manipulation not just of dream state, but actually time streams as well. So when you look at Inception and you pull it together with what happened with The Dark Knight Rising, it goes beyond the 3D realm into a place where you go, our reality is being altered by people in ways that I don't think we can really consciously understand.
I would agree with that. I think that it's a spiritual event, I guess. I mean, I think that the synchronicities are so strange that I just, it's hard to attribute it just to something that we see day to day. So it kind of goes to what I recall is like the whole story of Robert Anton Wilson and the Masks of the Illuminati, and how many of those, the deck card that a lot of people reference, how many of those things have actually come to pass in our modern society. Like, he wrote a blueprint for the emergence of the New World Order, so I see that correlation between his work and people who've derived stuff from that work and the events of.
Wow, you really got LA in the background there tonight, dude. That's awesome. Yeah, for those who don't know, William's in Los Angeles, so you get a little bit of a snapshot in the background, kind of a sound collage.
It's the Omega Man out there,
Well, I had a plane flying very low overhead here, and this is my new studio, which is actually above ground. The old one was underground, so you get the full effect when planes come over. So it's there's a lot of ambient noise going on.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. Gosh, I hit her all right. This new work that you've done, William, is probably even more dark and even more, and not that you intend it to be dark. A lot of what you're doing, you come at this from a spiritual perspective, but of exposing the unfruitful work of darkness, so to speak. We're talking here about, I'm a parent, you're a parent, and we have a group of second graders, Stephen Branch, Christopher Byers, and James Michael Moore, who wind up getting caught up in what I guess we can call a teenage satanic cult. Damian Wayne Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Muskelly Jr. Can you kind of pick up a thumbnail narrative for the listeners about what occurred here and the time frame to just kind of put this picture together?
Sure. I mean, it's this whole story about the West Memphis 3 is really a saga. It's kind of, it has so many chapters, but it all started in West Memphis, Arkansas, which is across the Mississippi River from Memphis, Tennessee. And one night on May 5th, 1993, 3 young second graders went out for a bike ride and did not come home. And, initially people thought that they were just out camping and there was a search. And unfortunately, they weren't found. The next day, the local police got involved to look for them, and they met a really tragic, brutal end. And they were found submerged in a ditch outside of their town of West Memphis, and they were brutally beaten. They were hog-tied wrist to ankle by shoelaces, and two of them were still alive, and so they were drowned, and one had already died of blood loss. And people were terrified. They didn't know. There had been rumors of satanic and occult activity in the woods, and there clearly was, after my reading of the case, something was definitely going on in that community. And they didn't have anybody. They had a central suspect who had been already in the local police system. His name was Damien Eccles. His real name was Michael Wayne Hutchison. He changed it to Damien on Halloween with his stepfather, but which is kind of an ominous name referring to the omen. But he was an initial suspect. He lawyered up about a week later after failing a polygraph. And so he was there, but the police had assigned a lot of people to work on the case. They eliminated other suspects, and they brought somebody in who they didn't know who was associated with the case. His name was Jesse Meskelly. He was 16 or 17 years old at the time. He's not the brightest bulb in the box, so to speak, but he essentially confessed after being at the police station for a while, and he implicated Damien Eccles and Jason Baldwin. They were arrested. And essentially, they were tried in two different trials. There was a trial with Jesse Meskelly because he confessed, and then the other two kept their denial going, and they've never confessed really to the police. The Jason Baldwin and Damien Eccles, they were tried separately. So two separate juries found them all three guilty. And Damien Eccles got a death sentence. Baldwin and Meskelly essentially life in prison plus 20 years. So they were going to be convicted. I mean, they were going to stay in jail for the rest of their lives.
Did Meskelly turn state's evidence? Did he testify against?
He did not. There was a huge issue. They were trying to get him to testify at the other two's trial, and it's a issue of dispute as to why his lawyer did not do a plea deal. They were trying to hold him out on appeal and try to get him a reduced sentence. And it's one of the gripes about the case, about the defense, is why didn't they, plea him out for a 15-year, 20-year deal and get the real, henchman. Meskelly he was not part of the central kind of core of the coven that was taking place there. And so he had left the crime scene too. He had not disposed of the bodies. He had some, definitely some misgivings about the whole situation. And anyway, so he never testified against the other. And there was a lot of strange things that happened. People gave testimony, that could perjure themselves and then recanted it and then wouldn't show up on trial. And this whole saga is very ornate. It's very complex. But essentially what happened is while this was taking place, because it was such a heinous crime, it garnered national attention, but it also brought the interest of an HBO team of documentary filmmakers who went down and filmed 400 hours of video, and they made movies about it. And the first one was called Paradise Lost. It came out in 1996. I thought it was pretty objective. But the second one in the series, there's a trilogy. The second one kind of came up with some other suspect who was a stepfather of one of the children who died. His name was John Mark Byers, and kind of made him look like he could have been culpable or involved. And it created this kind of groundswell in American society of supporting these convicted killers as innocent. And the trials were very detailed, and all the records. It's one of the better kept records of any trial. I was able to go through and look at the original records, which is one of the reasons why I got a much clearer picture from what's out there as far as misinformation and disinformation. But essentially, the John Mark Byers was now the second guy. There was this huge groundswell of support, and it finally ended up on getting a lot of celebrities involved in this case. People like Johnny Depp, the maker of Lord of the Rings, is Peter Jackson, guy from Pearl Jam, Eddie Vedder, Natalie Maines from the Dixie Chicks. So all these people, kind of groundswelled, and they raised somewhere between $10 and $20 million for a war chest to work to get these guys out of jail. And they got the best of the best. They got one of the best appellate attorneys. His name is Dennis Reardon. They actually got John Douglas from the FBI to come out, and they got Michael Bodden, who is a nationally respected expert in forensics, to come out and give testimony in 2007. And they still weren't buying it in Arkansas. They didn't really get the sympathy of the Arkansas judiciary. But what they really did, and how this case was essentially the lever upon which these guys got released in 2011, was that they took it to the public, and they just, made the state of Arkansas look like hillbillies and incompetent and all this other stuff. And eventually that pressure that lasted for years and years and years got them released on what's called an Alford plea. There was a negotiation that took place, and this is kind of a pretty simplified version of the whole events, but essentially an Alford plea means that it's North Carolina versus Alford, they could profess their innocence in the public, but plead guilty. So they all pled guilty again. They already had guilty charges, so they're guilty of law once, and then they pled guilty and signed that they were guilty of the crime, and were all released in 2011. Now, during this
wait a minute. How the hell does that work? This is a heinous, hideous crime. They've publicly pleaded guilty, and then they wind up being released?
Right. And that is the shocking thing. That's what I didn't understand. I still almost don't even understand how that happened. It was a negotiation between the state of Arkansas. What had happened is there was one judge, a guy by the name of Burnett, who was on the case for 18 years. And he had seen everything, and he moved up to, I think, the state senator position, and or became a state senator, and there was new blood. There were two new guys, a judge by the name of Laser and a new DA by the name of Ellington, and they were afraid of going back to trial. There was an upcoming evidentiary hearing, and because of the public outcry that these guys were innocent, it exerted enough pressure upon this new Ellington and Laser to have a negotiation. So they released them. They're under 10-year probation. Essentially, there's a lot of stuff they can't do, but they got out of jail. It's really an incredible story, because this guy Damien Echols is on death row, and usually, I think the statistics are almost nil of getting off death row. If you get the death sentence, you almost never get out, so it's like 1 in 100. So he's out. Now, this whole case, the reason why I got interested in this is I was doing research on another book, which I've been trying to finish forever, about the followers of Crowley. So I've been tapping away, and I came across this video of one of the prosecutors quizzing this kind of central figure, Damien Echols, about Aleister Crowley. Echols had made some doodle about Aleister Crowley, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. What's this all about? And so I started to research, and the public perception of this case is these are railroaded kids who are just picked out because they have black hair and they dress funny. And a lot of the public really bought that. But after my research, it was the complete opposite. Occultism suffuses the entire case. It suffuses all of their writings. This Damien Echols loved Crowley. And because I knew Crowley, I had known what he was saying. And in his book, he wrote a book after he got released. He's put out a book and a documentary. The book is called Life After Death, as in Life After Death Row, and the other is West of Memphis. And they're both like puff propaganda pieces. But in Life After Death, he talks about the Albermelin working, which is something that Crowley did, which was based on a book about Abramelin the Mage. But essentially, it's about getting control of the demons of the world. And, you do this long ritual. It's essentially Solomonic magic. And, about the 72 head chief demons or servitors, et cetera, But then he tried to contact his HGA, and that was something that Crowley used as kind of a blind, his holy guardian angel, which to Crowley was Satan. And so Echols is doing the same thing and writing about it in his book. And I'm like, people, don't you see this? Well, it gets worse, because once he got out, he waited about 3 or 4 months, and then he got right back into where he was before he got arrested. He's now hanging out with Satanists. He's tattooed his whole body with kind of an occult tattoos. He is associating with some of the hardest core groups and devil worshippers out there. He's got associations with the Process Church of the Final Judgment, which is the same group that Charles Manson was involved in.
Exactly.
And it's really just a shocking case. And he moved to Salem, Massachusetts, because he thought that would be the safest place. And Salem was the place where the original witch trials took place in the United States,
back
in colonial era. So it's just, in this case, this whole situation is still ongoing. There's a significant amount of people. I wasn't the first one to figure out that there were people who knew that they were all full of baloney from the beginning. But, I've only been involved in researching this for probably 6 to 9 months, but there are other people who followed them who haven't been conned by this propaganda PR machine. And there's one of them, interestingly, is this guy Michael Blatty, who's the son of Peter Blatty, who wrote The Exorcist.
Yes.
So that's the long and short of it. I mean, it's a long saga. It's been 20 years, but the amazing thing is that this is still ongoing, although the PR machine for this guy is starting to crumble, and God only knows what will happen next.
But what you just, you ticked off a list of people there, and we're talking about people like Johnny Depp, Natalie Maines. Johnny Depp, this guy, he owns a club called the Viper Room, which is where River Phoenix died of a drug overdose right at the door.
Right, on Halloween.
On Halloween, yes. And are we seeing the Hollywood satanic cult raise its head publicly now to work their mojo in some sort of way to vindicate their dark operatives?
I when I first started writing this book, I didn't see that, but now that I see the network and the correlation in Depp's history, he has a very interesting history. But yeah, I tend to believe that what you're saying is really the truth.
It's been alluded to for decades and decades, and going back even to the 1920s. The cults inside of the Hollywood system. I mean, if you just even on a simple level look at all of the symbology behind Disney, which has spent 60 years basically indoctrinating children in Illuminati imagery and all kinds of dark things woven into these beautiful colored cartoons. We know that system exists there. We know that Hollywood works on blood sacrifice. I've shared the story of when I was in New York meeting a woman at a party where I was playing, who came up to me and struck up a conversation and began to tell me about blood sacrifice in the entertainment industry. And she said, "Oh yeah, keep your eyes open. You'll see this." 2 weeks later, Sid Vicious took out Nancy Spungen 10 blocks from the apartment that I was staying at the time. The woman was a DuPont heiress, I was told.
Wow. Wasn't that at a famous hotel, too?
Yeah, it was the...
what do they call that? The
Chelsea. Hotel. The Chelsea Hotel.
Yeah. And so that's interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's interesting you brought that up because... this guy, Damien Eccles, who's the central person, has spent time there and took pictures of himself there. It has some kind of underground...
It's a pilgrimage. Yeah.
And one of his associates is this guy, Dave Navarro from Jane's Addiction.
Yes.
And this guy is these guys are into some of the darkest stuff you can imagine. I mean, it's amazing. But he hangs out with Damien Eccles.
Well, he hangs...
Anyway, sorry.
Hasn't Eccles been seen as well with Marilyn Manson?
Correct. So he's been with Marilyn Manson, Depp, this guy Genesis P. Orridge, who's a long-term, long-range process member, which is the it's up there with the OTO as like some of the hardest core, devil worship stuff out there. I mean, it's
Isn't it interesting that the Process Church pops up again? I mean, it's been so long. What was it? 1969, the Manson murders. And the Process Church has somehow managed to keep going. And I suspect that, thinking back, and it's been a while since I've looked at it, that this is probably the Underground Railroad for all the latent Satanists that are operating out in the West Coast.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. This whole situation brings to mind some books that I've read in the past. The Ultimate Evil by Maury Terry.
Yes.
And there was another one. There was other stuff about Manson, and it's just incredible. The process. One of the reasons why the process got away with a lot is right after Manson, they went totally underground. They changed their name. They went by something called the Foundation.
Yes.
And all this other stuff. But they're still around. And I mean, I've seen stuff I don't even want to tell you about who is still in the process. It's amazing. I mean, I'll tell you offline, but I mean, I usually will disclose everything, but my research took me to a place that I was shocked. They're still around.
Another aspect to this, William, and this is Arkansas. And I don't want to be bigoted here, but Arkansas is rather noted, certain parts of it, for being an energy center for some very dark things. Is that the case in this particular area where this murder occurred? Did you see signatures of, I would say, continual systematic Satanism?
I did. I saw that they were clearly networked. It seems like these guys were brought up into a system of connections that happened across the river in Memphis. They even referred to people like local eccentrics in Memphis that they associated with. So they were kind of like the new blood, so to speak. They were younger, but clearly they were associating with older people. There's one reference in my book about this guy, Alvis Clem Bly, who was 37, who was involved in this. So they were clearly mixing with people who were older. They weren't just some kind of atomized small group. And the coven that they were involved with, according to all the evidence that's in the book, in the police records, was sizable. It consisted of over 10 people. And, Arkansas back then, this is the era of the boys on the tracks, like all the cocaine drug. I mean, Arkansas is very rough.
Yeah.
The political hits by
this
Clinton,
was the Mena airport. Yeah.
Correct. So, these people, and that they come out of a rough, area that's kind of middle to lower middle class. All three of them were trailer park kids, and their sensibilities are very, people can't apply standard sensibilities to these people. A lot of them aren't educated over 9th grade. Most of the people are on disability, and so there's like a suspicious. And even in my book, I talk about how witchcraft is very people who feel unempowered. Feel empowered through witchcraft. If they can't find power somewhere else or can't adapt. So I try to emphasize that theme in my book. So to get back to your original question about a nexus, the Arkansas is pretty rough.
Upon the release of these guys, what was the real public reaction? I mean, was there an outcry? Was there protests from the families, the survivors of the victims of this? What was the public reaction to this?
Well, I think that because of the skilled PR and the amount of money, the team of these West Memphis 3 effectively convinced most of the United States that they were innocent, that they were railroaded, and they're very skilled. The people who are behind them are very skilled, which is telling something else is going on here, but they will only go on shows where they dictate the questions, so nobody gets off script. And I've seen people filter through questions from the audience. If they don't want to answer it, they won't. So they have a very sharp PR guy who is very experienced with other big companies, who's helping them, and they won't go on shows of conflict. People who the only time that I've seen like an actual conflict took place, and I give them credit, is actually The View, which is the ladies' television daytime show, where they really asked him hard questions about Satanism and stuff like that. And I actually have a thing of that show, and you can see it on my website, which is www.occult911.com, where the guy is making all these satanic signs, the sign of silence. He's got his hands in the sign of the square, which I think is like a Masonic thing where you hold your elbow. Yeah. So he's doing all kinds of like signs while he's lying about, his satanic work. But so I think that as far as like the outcry, a lot of people just accepted it. Like when I had seen that they had gotten out, I just remember flippantly saying, okay, they must have been innocent. This is like a year and a half ago. So I just believe the cover story, but upon deeper analysis, it's clear that it's the exact opposite. And so the parents, most of the parents are definitely 100% convinced these guys did it. There are a couple too that kind of changed. That John Mark Byers has changed his opinion, and also one of the mothers is kind of vacillating, it seems like. But they're also, because of this, the interest in this case and all the money that's involved, and all the reputations and all the, that they have actually been paid a lot of the people in West Memphis, so this one mother is getting something like $2,000 a month to be involved in this new movie, which is kind of like a little bit of a, there's clearly there's all kinds of ethical issues with the lawyers and the doctors and all the external media stuff, but it's a serious issue to think that she's being honest when somebody's paying her like a stipend. So anyway, there is I didn't know what I was getting into when I wrote this book. A lot of people just ignored a lot of the occultism that's just palpable in this case, but there's a lot of passion in this case, and there's a lot of conflict, and there's definitely a solid core who know these guys are guilty, and it's essentially centered in Arkansas. Most of the legal people in Arkansas know that they're guilty, and they got all their due process there. There were 2 juries who come up with unanimous guilty pleas that went to the state Supreme Court twice. The state Supreme Court verified that the defense attorney for Eccles actually filed a writ of certiorari with the United States Supreme Court, the biggest house in the country, a legal body in the country, and they denied the writ, which typically means there's nothing of issue here. There's nothing for us to review because there's no conflict. We don't disagree with any of the lower state rulings.
So there weren't any technical issues. There weren't evidentiary faux pas or like witness tampering or something like that would have drawn this into question to the degree where they would have gotten a review.
Right, with the state courts.
Right.
That's correct. And so they fought this case in the public, and there's the court of public opinion is something that I talked about, but they. The state courts weren't buying it. There were some evidentiary problems. The police kind of blew a couple things here and there. There were the allegations of stuff, but I took a much broader view of what happened leading up to the crime and what happened today. One of the central guys, Jesse Miskelly, after he got convicted, the same day he confessed again to 2 police officers. Then he called his attorney and convinced against the advice of his attorney, confessed again and said he was there and these guys did it on a recording that's still extant. It still exists. And then he confessed again on putting his hand on a Bible. So this guy confessed after his conviction, which is like he's already going to the big house for the rest of his life. Why would he lie? He was telling the truth, and so there's all kinds of obvious things that show that they're guilty and they're culpable.
Now, going back, and you detail a lot of this is actually a pretty big book that you've written. It's over 500 pages. You detail extraordinary narrative, even where Eccles is basically providing the police with details they weren't aware of.
Right. And I kind of keyed in, I came across and did a lot of research with people who had already written about the case. This is a very detailed case. All the court documents can be found at www.callahan.8k.com. So I was able to look through there, and it's all there in writing. I mean, it's all written down for anybody who wants to read through it. And there were other bloggers who had gone through it. A guy who's a really good crime writer, Trench Reynolds, and Blink on Crime. There's a really good site called West Memphis 3 Truth. But this guy, Eccles, had said so much stuff that was incriminating. But one of the central things that incriminated him that was written down that nobody could have known but him on the scene was that the boys had been urinated on, and that Eccles seemed to know that they were thrown in water to try to cover up that evidence. And excuse me, the only way they found out there was urine in the stomachs of the boys was like 3 weeks later when the Peretti, the forensic doctor, found it in there to everybody's amazement. So essentially, if they ever went back to court, they could bring up these documents, verify their accuracy, and it would be pretty damning. I think a jury would probably that with a whole bunch of other information. So I think that their attorneys were actually fairly wise to not go back, or cunning or sharp, whatever you want to call it, to not go back into a trial and try to plea it out, because there was enough there that the whole thing would be blown up.
Give us because it sounds to me like Eccles wanted to be perceived as an expert in some way. Give me a psychological profile from your view on your research of this particular character, because he's kind of the pivotal figure. He's the central guy, as I understand, of the three of them.
Yeah, I agree with you. And when I first started writing, I didn't understand that, but he was 18 years old, so he was old enough, to be. He wasn't in his minority. He was an adult, as the law sees it. He had a 16-year-old sidekick who was this guy Jason Baldwin, and then this Miss Kelly guy who was wasn't the sharpest knife in the old drawer, so to speak. So. He was definitely, and he spent a lot of time reading. He was actually kind of an autodidact. He read as much as he wanted about occult subjects. He didn't really do well. He did horribly in school, but he seems to have mastered a lot of occult knowledge. And, he even read a lot in jail. He said he turned his jail cell into a sanctuary and did a lot of reading about all kinds of stuff. He covered Crowley, covered, pretty much a lot of the major occultists out there, but he definitely seems to have the capacity to manipulate people and lie and straight-faced lie, and he really wanted to be, he thinks of himself as a magician. Even in his most recent documentary, which he has a producing credit on, he said, all I wanted to be was a magician in life, and he always talks about magic with a K, as Crowley wrote it, and he references Crowley. He's got Crowley on his Twitter feeds, and he had a dream of being. He really wanted to. I think for me, he really wanted to be this kind of black magician, and he lied about He lied about being into Wicca, and he deceived people about his white witch practices, and the people who knew him said it was all a bunch of baloney, but I think that it's clear that he had a dream for himself that superseded the other ideas of his fellow convicted murderers, because one is still in West Memphis and the other one moved on the other side of the whole country to Seattle, and he went to Salem, Massachusetts, and then he wrote a book. It's just an amazing story, Randy, because he is going out on this book that has, been on the New York Times bestseller list, telling these stories, talking about how he was unjustly convicted and going in front of all these audiences. And, it's just incredible. So he really wants to be famous. And he definitely has done a good job of creating this follower. One of the writers, this guy Trench Reynolds, refers to his followers as adherents to Ecclesology, which is like a mix of his last name and Scientology, because they don't look at all the facts of the case. They ignore certain things that Miskelly did. They ignore the fact that he's into the occult. They believe all the stuff how he was railroaded. So it's an interesting, from an objective view, an interesting kind of sociological kind of not an experiment, but an occurrence that shows that how people can be manipulated, deceived, and convinced of something that's the complete opposite of the truth. So getting back to your original question on his personality, he also had this huge file. He had been in and out of jails and mental institutions prior to the crime, and it's called Exhibit 500, and it indicates his interest in the occult, that he's not thinking like what you would term normal, that his ideations are aggressive, and he was into drinking blood and all this other stuff that is just way overboard. And I think that it shows that he's not totally stable, and I wouldn't even put him into somebody who is a functioning person in society. And he's going on some kind of weird transformation, like he's got tattoos over his whole body. He put a black sun on his back. And stuff about that, like he put a black sun.
Well, we just did a show on that last week.
Yeah, I just saw that. So he did the black sun on his back with the 2 double cross, which is used in the Church of Satan. And it's almost like something from like Red Dragon, the movie Red Dragon, or Silence of the Lambs. Like he's undergoing some kind of metamorphosis or something. So it's really crazy what's going on.
I keep coming back to this horror. And if it's okay with you, can I keep you over for half an hour?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I am more stunned talking about it now with you, because sometimes talking about things catalyzes it. The complicity of these celebrities towards this guy, and the fact that we see him basically being set up as this cause celeb by Hollywood to what? Mainstream Satanism in some way, to make it acceptable to create a martyr from somebody who has this manufactured injustice at the expense of 3 innocent 8-year-old boys.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, it's just totally demented. Here's the kicker, Randy. There's a movie coming out in October that stars like Class A Oscar-winning actors. It's got Reese Witherspoon and the guy who was the Peter Finch, I think, from The King's English. I mean, they are playing these characters, and I can I'm anticipating just this total Hollywood whitewash that's going to make all the people in Arkansas who are the police look like Boss Hogg from what's that old show? Gosh,
Dukes of Hazzard.
Thank you, Dukes of Hazzard. So that's one of the memes that they've successfully implanted in the public, and is that these people are all toothless hillbilly, and I think that the cops were just horrified. They didn't know what they had there when 3 young kids get killed like that. You can't. For me, it's like they didn't know what was going on. They had some suspicions, but anyway. So
a cult. This is clearly an area of specialization in criminology. Dealing with occult murders, and we've had them here. They occur sporadically all over the country. Where I live here in Pennsylvania is not all that far from Arkansas, at least in terms of the satanic shadow that sits over it. And plus the fact that we had Nazis hidden here for 40 years, ex-Nazis. But the whole thing about it is that most police are not trained in this. This requires a mind, it requires a mind like yours that's able to go through and parse the symbology behind it, because really the patterns play out in the symbology itself, which goes into, your book goes into the sigils and into the accoutrements of black arts, and even the psychology behind it. Most people do not perceive this. This is not normal evil. This is the part that most people don't get. This is an evil that comes from a place to indwell a soul. And I'm saying this is not religious talk here. One of my darker moments was when I realized there literally are people walking this planet who are soulless, and they are inhabited by entities. And the more I read through this book, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to give it a more thorough read, but the more I read it, I realized that theory still holds very strongly for me, because how else do you explain this willingness to move over into something so dark and so sick and so treacherous?
It's a good point. It's really disturbing for me to see somebody who is really that evil. This guy, I think the jury's keyed in to Eccles being like a really evil incarnate and lying. And he had done also, he said that he put a spirit of a widower in his body that gave him strength. So he believes that the blood gives him strength. He thinks that bathing in the moon gives him strength. He believes that spiritual possession gives him strength. And he even wrote in sepia ink on his knuckles, EVIL. So he identifies with to fly or ride under the banner of evil. And it's something that I think that is his personality. So, and it's something that all people should really be aware of. There's people out there who know they're evil and will act on that in the society.
Yeah, and we've done shows on psychopaths, but this is not even psychopathy. This is something else. This is almost hard to define, because I think normal people do not have the capacity for it. We encounter psychopaths and we understand them because they run our world. But this is evil mutant strain of something else. And I was looking through the book, and I was stunned when I saw the picture of him in his sentencing. And I'm sorry, this is a visual. The audience has not seen the book, I assume. At his sentencing, and first glance at his face, you ever look at something and you get a snapshot, and I looked at him and I transposed Crowley's face on him.
Yeah.
I mean, how close of a parallel is he personality-wise? The histories are different. Personality-wise to what you understand about Aleister Crowley?
Well, that's a great question. I think that I would put him as more like the Trailer Park Crowley, but he envisions himself as, somebody who's knowledgeable out of all things of the occult. He's got all the black bag of, Crowley tricks, hypnosis, mind control. He does the tarot. He's got secret hand gestures, and he wants to be kind of an occult, mastermind who wants followers. I mean, he's clearly out there, kind of like Manson, creating a family. And Crowley kind of did the same thing when he started his Abbey of Thelema or his OTO or his secret societies. He, evangelized his view of the occult, and I think Eccles is doing that too. And I think it's pretty clear, at least from what I've seen since I've written. The book was published December 1st of last year, so it's only been out 3 months. But I mean, some of his followers, he's clearly getting people to do his dirty work for him. So he can't do much under what he arranged for, but these people show up on these message boards and say the nastiest work, and it's the parallels are definitely there. And I think that even I talked about earlier, this whole thing about the HGA, like he was clever. I don't know how he figured it out, but Eccles is clever and smart enough to realize what Crowley was doing by reaching his HGA, which just was a blind or a topical phrase for the devil. And it takes a long time to kind of parse through Crowley to see what he was really saying. And Eccles has seemed to be able to discern that, whether he did it with help or not, I don't know.
So Eccles and these guys are now free, and he's becoming a celebrity. He's got this group of Hollywood. What can you say? If you're going to support these guys and you're putting money behind it the way Hollywood did here, I have to assume that there was an agenda somewhere beyond even maybe writing a movie about this. And I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that. I mean, there are some things I don't think we fully understand because we're just, not capable of wrapping our mind around it. What is he currently involved with right now that you know of?
Well, Eccles is, he's associating with people who are involved in the Process Church. He's associating with the Church of Satan through Marilyn Manson. He's kind of making artwork and selling his book. And, I think that he's trying to lay low as people are starting to realize this is a bigger and bigger fraud, because I'm not the only one kind of talking about it. But, I think that what happens in the future will be very interesting. I just don't know how it'll end. And, I think that some of his followers or people, I put them into two different groups. Some of them are into the occult, and they don't care that this guy brutally, savagely murdered 3 kids. And there's another group that really believed the lie, and those people I think are going to start to peel off once they realize that, this is just a huge Titanic fraud.
People like this, and this was even with Crowley, tend to burn out people around them.
True.
The other side of this is, and I keep coming back to Hollywood because it's the most appalling aspect of this, is how they manipulate things to such a high degree. We long ago were able to kind of correlate Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard in the early days, I guess, the late 40s, early 50s, when they were doing the Babylon Rising ritual out at Palomar. And that, of course, gave rise to the OTO's dominance for a number of years in California. But then Hubbard came along, And in studying all of this, he put something quite diabolical and efficient together with Scientology. And a lot of people don't recognize Scientology in that light because of the seeming lack of satanic imagery. But it is actually serving the same process in that it is basically a mind control operation. Right. Do you see any crossovers between what you would call maybe the hardcore satanic aspect of Hollywood and the Scientology cults that exist within it?
I do. I mean, I think that Scientology has always had they have their own celebrity center in Hollywood. They have a huge building with the, Golden Dawn cross on Sunset that I drive by occasionally down here. So they clearly have their tendrils in Hollywood. And how much I don't really know as much as their ideology, how they can get that out. But they clearly want or covet followers from the Hollywood community. And, I think that, the ideas, the mind control is clearly something that L. Ron Hubbard was heavily involved in. I mean, once you get into Scientology, you just realize that he was mind controlling people from the beginning with all different types of techniques. And I think that's kind of similar as some Hollywood pieces are, which are deliberately, trying to get people to believe certain things. So I don't know. I don't know if it's something that I know of overtly.
Tell people again about the book and where and how they can get this book, William.
It's available on Amazon and Kindle right now. So that's really where it is. I just am trying to do a couple other things to get a new website up, and that'll be at www.occult911.com. I also have a WordPress site with a lot of articles that aren't in the book, and that's at occult911.wordpress.com. And you can just see some of the people that I've interacted with, and some of the supporters are amazing. I would definitely recommend, if people really want to look at this in great details, go to salemweb.com, which is a message board where, the supporters and the people who know he's guilty are battling it out with all kinds of information, and it gives you a good understanding about the points and counterpoints that are used to kind of ascertain what really happened in this case. So,
do you have any plans to go to hard copy at any point with this book, like you did with Prophet of Evil?
Well, there is a hard copy.
Okay.
So Amazon, you can get it as paperback. So, it's definitely a lot better shape than my first book. The hard copy is pretty, thorough. I kind of, I think that I made a pretty convincing point that, they definitely did it. And, it's just that once you really just look at the fundamentals of the case, it's clear of their involvement in this murder. And it's just shocking that they got away with it and they've continued to lie about it.
From a spiritual standpoint, are we at the place where there really is an attempt now to mainstream this particular aspect of evil? I mean, we've seen it in the softer veins for a long time. We've seen it in films, entertainment, the music industry. It's been all over the place. And like I said, the elites practice this, and most people don't realize they're aware of it. It's why I keep going back to what that woman in New York told me in 1977, because it was like, I think that person was put in my path to wake me up to something very dark that I needed to know. And it stuck with me. That you say, we talk about the rich and famous and they're not like us. No, they're not like us. They operate on a different scale, and they run off of an energy pattern that most of us couldn't conceive of, even if we had it put before us. Is that kind of where this all goes? I mean, 9/11 being what it was, it streamed another dark energy into our culture and basically, opened some portals, some gates?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that when you say normalization, I think that the people who support this guy are blinded by their own practices. They don't see, they want this change, this kind of revolutionary, radical, satanic change. So for them to get him out and do all this stuff, that's just normal. I mean, Depp, for me, is one of the central figures because of his... I mean, he's definitely network. He comes from the Hunter S. Thompson group, who, Hunter S. Thompson and his stories about the Franklin cover-up and Bohemian Grove are of the blackest stripe. And Depp has actually taken some of Hunter S. Thompson's tattoos, and now Eccles has the same tattoos, which is like the fist in a knife. And, Depp's been in From Hell and The Ninth Gate, which are insights into exactly what you said, which is elite occultism. And so he's very well familiar. I don't think he's shocked about it. And the guy's worth so much money. I mean, he has more money than he probably knows what to do with. So
he's probably the second or third highest ranking actor in Hollywood, probably just a little under Tom Cruise and a few others, which is interesting as well, because when you look behind the surface and some of the high-profile actors, if you look carefully, you'll find somewhere there's an occult connection. And when I say occult, I understand the word means hidden, and it has a lot of different applications, but we're talking here the dark stuff. We're talking about occult practices that basically at its ultimate level go to human sacrifice, ritual satanic abuse, and usually acts of crimes against innocence.
Right. I would agree with that. And Depp is really something else. I mean, and here's the other kicker: is what Eccles likes to do? Well, what Eccles has done since he's got out is he's put these magical circles on his body. They're pentacles. And you can see them in my book, but they have sigils, and they have this Theban alphabet, which is a magical alphabet. Well, Johnny Depp has gotten those same sigils on his body tattooed, just like Eccles. And you can see this thing about them sharing tattoos and getting the same tattoos. There's also this other tattoo they all have, which is on the back of their right hand, which is a bird. It's what is it? The blackbird is a raven. It has some kind of significance, but I've seen that around. So these tattoos that they're getting are like markers of their occult society. So, and they have meanings I don't fully understand.
I had actually a few years ago interactions with another talk show host, and he's gone now. He went into the sigil research, and in the midst of doing sigil research, he melted down. He said, "I need to get out of this." He said, "I can't deal with the darkness that this has brought upon me by researching it." And he was basically a pretty spiritual person coming from a Christian side of things, and this guy, he melted down over this. He said, "This is so much more powerful than anybody realizes."
It's definitely powerful. And for me, I recognized there's a total spiritual aspect to this entire case. And to me, it just is distilled into the cosmological battle of good and evil. It's a satanic adversarial enemy of humanity. And, I think that once I saw the totality of what's happening and the groupings and the way that the lines are drawn, it's just, it's like the cosmic chessboard of the battle in heaven, battle on earth. And it's odd how it's played out to that, or distilled in my understanding like that. So it's unfortunate, but it really is. This is an incredible, that's why I titled the book Abomination. It's an abomination, like an Old Testament abomination, where you cannot condone the murder or lie about it of three innocent 8-year-olds who were out playing in the afternoon, just like I did when I was 8, who just were brutally tortured, horrifically murdered, and now it's just this nightmare of a whole bunch of lies in public. I mean, it's just incredible deception. It's just off the charts.
One of the things that I came to realize, again, as a result of the research I did last year, and that I've been doing for, I don't know, maybe about 7 or 8 years and ongoing, we're arcing energetically right now towards this gigantic cosmic battle. The dark side requires a blood sacrifice.
Yes.
And this case, if nothing else, feeds into my theory that they need increasingly greater acceptance of satanic practices to perpetuate the blood sacrifices. This is why I believe Sandy Hook occurred. 7 days before the December 21st so-called Mayan calendar.
Right.
And when you go back and you look at the cycles of these things, you realize they're stepping it up. They want the numbers. They need increasing cycles. This feeds into something, again, that, years of studying all of the spirituality and stuff, it's still very difficult to put our fingers on. But I think what you do with this book, William, is you crystallize a case that gives people a greater understanding of what goes on in the background and how, in this case, justice was completely subverted by big money powers, by pawns of the Illuminati, to basically exonerate these 3 perpetrators and to make a mockery of the death of 3 innocent children. Nothing new under the sun in that regard, huh?
Correct. I 100% agree with you. 100%. And, it's like even on your website where it says this is the rise of the old gods. It's like this increasing amount of violence and blood is exactly what happened in the old Aztec empires. It just was never enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's the old story of all kind of demonic involvement is they're always asked for more perversion and more blood, and it goes back to Crowley, and it's the same thing even in the Old Testament, Baal worship, and it just is the same kind of viciousness. And the timelines that you talk about, apparently I guess if you're into witchcraft or something like that, there are time frames within which you can do a sacrifice.
Right.
It doesn't have to be on the exact date, is my understanding.
It does not. No, within that cycle, and generally it will synchronize to a lunar cycle as well.
Right, and here's the kicker. Here's the interesting thing, Randy, is that this happened on May 5th, which Walpurgis Nacht is March 30th. So it was within the 7 days of, one of the more important...
That's also Cinco de Mayo, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's just interesting that, I don't know what they're thinking. I suggest in my book they were involved in cord magic, which is a really fundamental part of real Wiccan practice.
Yeah.
And the kids were tied with ropes and there were cords, so they might have been doing something. And I think that people have speculated these weren't the only 3 people there. There was a weird event that took place that night where some guy walked into the Bojangles restaurant who was covered in blood and feces and sat in the bathroom for an hour and a half. What are the likelihood that 3 kids die and then something that weird happens at the same night, with mud, and they spotted Eccles with mud, and, it's just some people have speculated that Miss Kelly just wanted to tag Eccles and Baldwin, and there are other people unknown, and there were other people involved. There was this other guy named H.G. Hollingsworth or something like that, who they think was involved, but he died in a car crash when he was 25, so he's out of the picture. It was 7 years later, but they just didn't have enough evidence to charge him with anything. But he was involved in suspicious behavior because the lady who was running a laundromat saw him come in at 10:30 and wash all these clothes in the laundromat. Muddy clothes at the end of the laundromat's day, So there's all kinds of other suspicious stuff. They just didn't have enough evidence to find anybody else, but they had enough to get Eccles. So, and the other assumption that people have is this is the first time it happened out there. So, just because they didn't have evidence on anybody else or any other events doesn't mean that it wasn't happening. There are all kinds of other strange occurrences taking place in West Memphis. There were stories of rapes taking place. There were children being abused.
Yeah.
It was really kind of a nightmare situation, and that's why in my book I tried to recount other stories of other young satanic killers, because there's all kinds of the same type of escalation that takes place and similar occurrences. They're always going out to the forest. Essentially their animals are dying, or they go out and torture animals, and that just escalates up till somebody gets killed.
Yeah, this is something else, recognizing patterns. This is why it's so important that people like you do this work, because people who read this book and go back and read Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11 and the New World Order, you get a microeducation in beginning to discern patterns that then when you go look at other events, you can do the research on it. This is really about waking people up to things that are around them, and there's really a wave of this coming. I've seen this for a long time, William, that we were going to head towards a wave of evil that has not been seen on this planet before. And for me, this is kind of the earmark of the whole thing.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because this guy, I mean, you want to talk about, so like you asked that question, similarities between him and Crowley. Crowley talked about his followers as like his group of freaks, and this guy Eccles has talked about, I want to be the king of freaks. And the people who he associates and he's kind of has as his kind of toadies, followers are a crew of people who are they do some of the wildest stuff. I just don't even want to go into detail, but like they put poles in their backs and hang from the roofs, and there's bloodletting, and I mean it's really this network system he's attached to, who are really are basically, you could call them witches. I don't know, modern occultists. They're what type of term you want to use, but it's like a networked level of evil that I don't think people are prepared to look at and see. And you don't want these people in your community. I mean, I got to tell you. I mean, I'm afraid for the people in Salem, Massachusetts. Yeah. Apparently, Eccles is hanging out at the YMCA, and there were rumors that he scoped these kids out, the 3 kids in 1993, and he had pictures of them in a black briefcase. And that was in the court record. These were in the police investigative records. But, it just was nothing that was ever involved. So, I mean, this is...
Well, Salem, Massachusetts has a definite vibe to it. I've been there. And there are places you go where if you have some sensitivity to the spirit around you, you'll have a disturbance. There's a disturbance that lives there. It's baked into it. It doesn't mean that it's a bad place or that everybody there is bad. I'm talking about basically perceiving the spiritual personality and the energy of a specific place. And Salem, Massachusetts is definitely one of those places because it's been consecrated to that.
Right, yeah. And it's definitely kind of like this centralized hub. I mean, it's amazing that he even wanted to move there, and it's such a central spot because he can camouflage himself there because of what happened in the past. And I deal with that in my book, and I show that, there was some, I mean, for me, I didn't research a lot of what happened back there with the whole, witch hunt. I took the point that they definitely overreacted and they killed, some innocent people were killed in those original witch hunts. But you got to think about the Puritans and their view of the world, which really aren't that much different than mine, which is, Ephesians 6:12, you fight against spiritual power. So they were paranoid. Interestingly, some of the girls were being read to from the Malleus Maleficarum, the original witch hunting guide that was coined on like one of the first books ever put out by the Gutenberg Press by guys in southern Germany. And so this legacy of witches is something that's risen and fallen in Western society from its inception, even going back into, kind of prehistory with the Druids and, even
it's always lived there. Yeah. And there's echoes of it. And there's always been places in this country, especially in North America, where you will find it around certain ancient ritual places as well. And that's a whole separate thing that, we could talk about someday.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I mean, this case encapsulates so many important themes for people to be aware of, at least for me, that's why I included. Some people ask me, why did I include stuff about witch hunts? Why did I include satanic killers? Because you can see the similarities and, just like you said, the patterns. And even King James, the drafter of the King James Bible, was involved in a witch event in northern Scotland, and he wrote demonology.
It was rampant in all the hierarchical systems, the royalty, the elites, the bankers, the Rothschilds, whatever. name and face you want to put on it. Hey, we got to close this show out, but William, it's been way too long. It was really great having you on and talking about the book. The book is Abomination, and you can pick it up at Amazon. One more time with your website, William.
So it's at www.occult911.com. You can see some of my other writings at occult911.wordpress.com. The book is available on Amazon and Kindle right now.
Excellent stuff. Stay on the line for a minute. I'll catch you as soon as I close the show out.
Okay, great. Thanks, Randy. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to talk to you again. It's really been, like you said, too long.
My pleasure, William. William Ramsey, the book's Abomination. Occult911.com is the website. Next week, we will have a double header. This wasn't on the website, I don't think. Chris Hawley and Mac Maloney are going to be here. Mac Maloney, writer of UFOs in Wartime, and Chris Hawley of Chris Hawley's Paranormal World. They're going to be here. They're friends, and we're going to go deep into the paranormal. Again, this is the place where you'll hear OffPlanet Radio. This is the stream where you will hear it. I'm not going to go into a lot of details about our separation with Wolf Spirit Radio. I think it's fair to say that it was just time for us to move on, and there will be some changes coming. That's just kind of the way this thing goes. It's very fluid, very dynamic. We'll be back again with another show next week. The truth is out there. It's inside you. Keep looking for it. We'll be back next week.
This is OffPlanet Radio.